Hello and welcome to another incredible edition of the CBB Supershow. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85, brought to you by the world famous FTN Network. And you know, when I'm rocking the rec specs, I mean business. I'm ready to go. We had a great time last night. We talked about the Pac-12, gave some predictions, got some names into your brains, getting you ready so you know what to expect. Like, hey, this player's 4K. My man Dub said this guy, he's going to be good. Let's play him. Let's do this. Let's avoid this. Like, I don't know, man. I'm just so excited. I had the day off for my day job. I've been looking at Big 12 stuff all day. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm just super jazzed. We are so close to the season starting. We are going to be talking about the Big 12 team by team, giving my thoughts, kind of, again, rolling through the roster so you guys have an idea of who's who. There is a just devastating amount of waiver denials going on right now, injury stuff. Like, there is a ton of uncertainty with some rosters throughout the country. With us going into the college basketball season in under 2 weeks, there are still rosters that really aren't set yet. It's pretty wild when you think about it. So the most recent one to be denied, my man Ray Battle, two-time transfer from my Washington Huskies to Montana State to West Virginia. Talked last night about that pipeline from Kentucky to Washington. We love that one. That Washington to West Virginia pipeline that seems to happen. We don't like that one as much, but alas, they're going to resubmit and see if they can get him through. But yeah, there's a lots of stuff. This Big 12 conference is legit. Obviously, there is a ton of new players. There's going to be changes. This is also, we talked last night, the last iteration of the Pac-12, really the last iteration. Big 12 is adding more teams. There's just a lot of changes. And this season, we're going to have a ton of, new looks there with Houston, UCF. Like, there's just going to be a lot to talk here about Big 12. I'm very, very excited. This is going to be a definitive top tier conference and one that could very well walk away with the championship, of course, with Kansas. I think Houston will still be good. We got our guys, Texas, Dylan Dessou. I missed my opportunity. I should have had my Dylan Dessou jersey out here. I got to set up where I'm going to have jerseys hanging in the back, but didn't make it tonight. The kids fell asleep. And if I go up there, I might not come back down because they may wake up, and then it's all bad from there. So we're going to get right into it here. Before I start talking about it, I did want to bring up came across a exhibition list for televised games, whether that's the SEC Network, ESPN Plus, ACC Network. There's a bunch of exhibitions. There's secret scrimmages going on right now. There's just all this stuff happening. As of right now, there is a bunch of exhibitions coming up on the 27th. Yesterday, there was Ohio State versus Dayton game. That was on ESPN Plus. That was fun to watch. But the 27th, Kentucky on the SEC Network against Georgetown College. Not the Georgetown you're thinking of. George Mason versus West Virginia on ESPN Plus. Damon versus Syracuse. St. Augustine's versus North Carolina. So there's 4 games there. 2 of them on the ACC Network. 1 on ESPN Plus. 1 on SEC Network. October 28th, Purdue versus Arkansas on ESPN Plus. That's going to be awesome. Definitely, that's one worth checking out. That is 4 p.m. Eastern for those of you on the East Coast. Houston will also be playing that day against Pembroke. So get your first chance to really see Houston. And then on 29th, Indiana versus Indianapolis. TCNJ versus Miami, Southern Miss versus Mississippi State. That one's on ESPN Plus, definitely worth checking out. And then the biggest one of the day, Kansas versus Illinois, which will be on the Big Ten Network, and Tennessee versus Michigan State, which will be on the Big Ten Network and also the Vol Network if you're fancy and you have that. And then on Halloween, Tennessee plays again against Lenoir Ryan. So we're going to have some very good opportunities to see Tennessee. And then the day before Halloween, there LSU plays Iowa and Texas, not against each other, different lower quality programs, but a chance to get to see some of these teams in action. If you are streaming on ESPN Plus or you have any of these other channels, lots and lots and lots of opportunities. Let's get into it. Let me pull up my sheet here. By the way, very positive feedback from the Pac-12 show yesterday. I appreciate those of you who took the time to watch that, get acclimated and familiar with the Pac-12 conference there. I know I go on late, so it's hard for some of you guys, but those of you who continue to support the show, I really do appreciate it, and we're going to rock and roll this season. A lot of fun stuff planned with the content, shows, written, betting side, all of that. All right, the first team I would like to talk about here is going to be the Kansas Jayhawks. We'll start with the best, right, or the projected best. Kansas team, you know, they were absolutely just murdered by the transfer portal, and most teams, when they lose a collection of talent like this, especially like young players, highly rated recruits that ended up transferring somewhere else. It's like most teams would be just crippled by that, right? But not Kansas. It's amazing that Kansas could lose the talent that they lost and still be looked at as a Final Four contender. Because it's really crazy. You know, they bring back a tremendous amount of guys, but like Bobby Pettiford gone, Ernest Udo gone, Jack Clements, Zuby, MJ Rice, Joseph. I mean, there's just like a crazy, crazy amount of talent. And then not to mention, of course, Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson, you know, off to the pro level there. Two of the best players on their team a season ago. Just insane. Now, the players that they bring in are massive. They go out here, right, and bring in Hunter Dickinson from Michigan, who many people talk about going to be, you know, not the best post player because Zach Edey's still around, has a pulse, right, but one of the best, certainly in the conference, and one of the best in the country in Hunter Dickinson. Bill Self is at his best when he has a solid post player, somebody that he can work through. Last season, you saw Jalen Wilson kind of, you know, sharing those duties with KJ Adams, but neither one of them a true, you know, big, and Ernest Udo was just way too raw. Kansas, typically with Self, he won't play freshmen. I mean, he played Grady Dick a lot, but he won't play those freshman bigs until they have a time to develop and get a little bit more acclimated to the collegiate basketball game. So they didn't have that center last year that we're usually seeing Bill Self having when he's at his absolute best. When they, you know, won the title, David McCormick operated in that spot. Over the years, they've had, you know, Udoka Azubuike, who was really, really good, right? Joel, you know, Embiid, I know he wasn't really playing there that much, but Azubuike, who was there for a million years, 7-footer, really good for the collegiate game. Kansas was just winning 30-plus games with regularity with him. Really, honestly, I'm feeling pretty good about Kansas' chances. I think that you give a guy like Hunter Dickinson to Bill Self and watch out. Not that I'm a huge Hunter Dickinson fan myself. I'm really not. But in this system, he's going to put up a huge amount of points. He's probably going to become one of, if not the most expensive player very, very quickly on DraftKings and FanDuel slates. He's just going to thrive. He's going to be a 40-plus fantasy point per game scorer with ease, Hunter Dickinson. They do bring in, you know, and the big problem with Dickinson at Michigan was the shooting, right? There was a lot of inconsistency. There was volume scores around him. Not really the best setup. Comes to Kansas, shooting, you know, what are they gonna do? Grady Dick's gone. They got to bring somebody in. So they bring in the Towson kid, Nick Timberlake, who is going to be a fantastic fit with Hunter Dickinson, somebody who's going to be able to shoot the ball, work out a double team, somebody that they can trust to knock down shots. He's a 42% three-point shooter on volume, very, very good. Redshirt senior, so he's been around the collegiate game for a while. He played for some pretty decent Towson teams. At least they were competitive to a degree. Somebody who's going to really do well on this team and probably maybe start at times. We'll see if Elmarko Jackson, the freshman, highly rated freshman that they have coming in. But I think you're looking at probably a starting lineup with returners of KJ Adams, Kevin McCullough, DeJuan Harris, then Hunter Dickinson, and Nick Timberlake. They also bring in Parker Brown, Christian's brother there, been around to Missouri, bounced around. Jamari McDowell, another freshman that comes in. One thing that sticks out to me about this Kansas team is the lack of depth. We talked about a few teams last night where the depth was super light, which we like for DFS. And then we saw there were some teams that were like, to my Huskies, 10, 11 guys deep potentially. So this is a team that we're going to see have a lighter bench. This is a coach in Bill Self that we've seen run, kind of that shorter rotation, especially when it comes to March. So we're really going to know the pecking order for this team. And as long as there's not a bunch of foul trouble, injuries, anything like that, I think we'll be able to know day in and day out on these Kansas slates who we're going to be able to use. I love the fact that KJ Adams is going to be able to play a little more of natural position. Can't shoot, a lick for threes. Hunter Dickinson did extend his range. He can hit threes, so they can use him in a variety of ways in this system. I think Adams' rebounding numbers are going to take a bit of a dip here with Dickinson, but overall I think he's going to get better looks. And he's going to be a much better offensive player as well, and I think that might surprise some people. McCullough, if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be fine. Scoring will take a dip for him, but we'll probably see his assist number go up. I think his rebound numbers will be fine. His steals will be high. McCullough, just depending on price-wise, is going to be his normal high-floor self. And then DeJuan Harris, who might surprise people that know that he shot 40% from long range a year ago. If that can continue, his assist number can go on. Harris is definitely an important piece to this roster. People don't really think of him as an offensive weapon, but he's certainly more of a reliable player on that side of the ball than someone like Severe Wheeler, for example, in terms of being able to shoot the ball with at least some consistency there. So Kansas definitely the real deal, regardless of what their bench shakes out, regardless of all that other, situations and guys leaving. It really truly is crazy to be able to lose the amount of talent that they had. Also, they were obviously going to have, I feel like I should probably mention it, Arterio Morris from Texas. Now, I was never really that excited about Arterio. He's good, but he's super raw. Didn't get to see a lot of what he could do at Texas. I wasn't so sure he's going to contribute as much as people thought he was. Like, there was so much talk about, wow, Morris on this Kansas roster is going to be incredible. I didn't personally see it, but we'll never know. Dismissed from the program. Sexual assault, rape, whatever, it's not a good situation. So that leaves them a little bit more lighter in the depth department, right? So we'll see what happens. But as long as this team stays healthy, I think they're going to be really, really good. Bill Self's just not a maniac. There's certain coaches you just can't count out no matter what their roster looks like. Obviously, Bill Self is one of those guys. They're going to need, though, Elmarko Jackson to compete right away, though. I think his leash will be short, as is typical of freshmen for Bill Self, but he's certainly a guy that is going to get the opportunities out of necessity. All right, talking about the Houston Cougars next. Houston, they lose Jarris Walker. I would have loved to have seen him for a second season. Wasn't meant to be. Tremont Mark off to be a guard-heavy team. I still don't know how that's going to work out. Marcus Sasser gone, Reggie Chaney gone, but they bring in some really nice pieces. LJ Cryer transferring in from Baylor. That's going to give them some shooting, some scoring opportunities. Damian Dunn from Temple, kind of a do-it-all type of player. Joseph Tugler, exciting freshman from Cypress Falls High School. Really kind of high upside kid. They also bring back Jamal Shed, senior guard, veteran. You got to love veteran guards. They have a lot of them, with Cryer and Dunn also being upperclassmen. Juwan Roberts returns for his final collegiate season. Javier Frances, who has incredible rates, played minimally last year, about 10 minutes per game, but he averaged over 4 points, over 3 rebounds, over a block, shot 72% from the field. Somebody that my man Varnicus, who is in our Dynasty League, super smart, sharp guy, talked him up a lot. That's one of his favorite guys. And he makes a pretty compelling case too, because if he slides into that Jarris Walker role, we're talking about a guy that may, kind of springboard from a 10 fantasy point in 10-minute guy to 25 fantasy points in 20 minutes type of guy. When you look at his rates, yeah, they were pretty solid at, over 17% usage rate. His rebounding rates combined well over 38%, a block rate over 14%, 62 for 87 from the field. So there's that 71% number, a lot of high percentage looks for him. But it's not as if he's some sort of giant 7-footer. He's just very skilled down low, and he's still relatively young. Comes in as a junior on paper, but a lot to still be proven, and if he's going to be able to handle a big increase in playing time. There are other youngsters who are going to be looked at, to kind of step up here too, right? Manny Sharp, Terrence Arsenault, both of those guys who had their moments last year as injury fill-ins or taking their turns as fantasy assets, are both going to have to play a lot of minutes here. Ramon Walker, healthy, he'll give them about 15 to 18 minutes as well. So there's going to be those situations, and it seems that way every year with Houston, where it's like pricing by February gets really tight, and you start looking at, hey, Manny Sharp's 4-5. He played 20 minutes last game. He scored 18. I could probably play him, but 2 games ago he played 8 minutes and scored 4. You're gonna have that situation here with Houston. But Joe Tugler, the freshman, definitely worth looking at. They do have a near 7-foot freshman in Jacob McFarland coming in. That's somebody that if Francis, can't pick up that Jarris Walker role, perhaps they look to him. And then also Milik Wilson, who's seemingly been with 3 or 4 teams at this point, comes over to the team as well. The most viable fantasy option still to me, when you're factoring in rebounds, blocks, steals, complete game, Juwan Roberts. I don't think last year was a blip. I think without Jarris Walker, we see his scoring step up significantly, averaged about 10 per game last year. I think Juwan Roberts is going to have himself a pretty damn strong year. You looked at his last season efficiency numbers, top 20 in offensive rating, top 50 in true shooting, offensive rebounding rate, top 50, combined rebounding rate, well over 25%, block rate, top 75, high percentage looks, not a 3-point shooter by any means, about 69% from the foul line, a little undersized, but he is very fearless, somebody who can get it done on both sides of the ball. He's definitely the guy that I like the most, but he's a known commodity, and I don't know that the sites are going to come into it like they did last year, underpricing him. I do think there'll be a big overcorrection in pricing for the guards. I think they'll all be super high priced early on. I think like Damian Dunn, LJ Cryer, there's potential for them, as long as DK doesn't biff it hard, for them to start out at like upper 7K range. And I think that we can definitely play any of these guys because Houston, rotation-wise, similar to Kansas, they'll be relatively shallow when it comes to that rotation unless, there's injuries, foul, stuff like that. The bench of Houston definitely not going to strike fear in anybody, and they're really going to need Javier Francis to take that next step and not foul so much. Fouls were the biggest problem for Javier Francis. If he can, give them 25 to 26 minutes with regularity, look out, because he's going to put up a big number, and this Houston team's just going to mow through people in a hurry. Shed's going to have to be a more reliable scorer, or a more consistent scorer, I should say, as well. See what happens with that. Jamal Shed, he's one of those guys where you don't roster him. He puts up 38 to 45, and you're like, shoot, you go ahead and play in the next slate. He puts up 12. They can't afford for him to have those kind of inconsistent games because there is no more Marcus Sasser. And I'm not really sure what to expect out of Damian Dunn just yet at this conference, this level with regularity. So Houston has themselves a very nice team, though. All right, Texas Longhorns, give it to Texas. I love this Texas team. I like Rodney Terry. I think he deserved the gig. Gone, Marcus Carr, timeless. Timmy Allen, Christian Bishop, Serge Jabari Rice, some really big pieces gone from this Texas team. They had to retool and really kind of shuffle the deck. Had Dylan Mitchell stayed in the draft and Tyrese Hunter, they would have really only brought back, 1, 2 contributors from this past tournament team. But lucky for them, they're bringing in some firepower, and they do have some guys returning that are very, very good. Starting with the returners, Tyrese Hunter, who can be offensively challenged at times, but you guys remember he was always cheap last year. You would find yourself needing a value play at the end of your roster. You got everything else right. You need one player left between 4-5 and 5-2. There sits Tyrese Hunter. You could talk yourself into him. You could get some steals. He could get hot from 3 once and again. Very, very unreliable player. He's going to have to take a step forward, but he returns. Dylan Mitchell will be relied on heavily. He's going to have to play a ton of minutes this year, I believe. He is up for the challenge, so I'm interested to see how he does in year 2. And then, of course, Dylan Dessou. Dylan Dessou, the indebted to my man, because the brand new washer and dryer that I posted a picture of last spring, he's pretty much responsible for those washer and dryer units because of his performance at low rostership. Dylan Dessou had himself a hell of a first weekend in the tournament. I'm obviously excited. We knew Dessou was good when healthy. Expect him to play a lot more minutes this year. Somebody who I'm love. I've been trying to get him in Dynasty season long, like all the leagues I can, offering trades. Every owner of him is just basically like, no, decline. I'm even trying to be like, oh, Dessou's banged up. You want to trade him to me, I'll take him off your hands, but nobody's buying what I'm selling there. He's going to have a big year, and he's going to have to if Texas is going to be, back into the tournament, making a run like they did last year. The transfer portal was good to them. They bring in Max Asmus, from Oral Roberts. You guys remember a couple of years ago, that Oral Roberts team that was so freaking good, making that tournament run. That game against Arkansas, honestly, like one of the most classic games of the past couple of years. A really, really fun one. Max Asmus absolutely, lighting it up there. They lose, what was it, 72-70? Let me pull that game up, actually. Yeah, 72-70. They almost pushed them to the brink. Max Asmus scores 25 points in that game. Kevin O'Banner had a really nice game too, double-double, 12 and 11. That was a really fun team. You could have seen Max go to the NBA draft after that because his stock never would have been higher, right? And it's not as if he fell off after that, but Oral Roberts definitely wasn't able to, and that team was 18 and 11. Jeez, they weren't able to build on that too well, right? Like they didn't win 20 games the next year. They got bounced from their conference tournament. They did go 30-5 a year ago, lost to Duke by a lot in the tournament. Definitely overmatched there. But I think Max Asmus has this opportunity now to kind of bring his draft stock back into play and prove that he belongs. And now he's going to get that opportunity to play upper tier, teams night in and night out and be on, every TV and be able to put up these big games. And he's going to play a lot of minutes. Look for Max to play that Marcus Carr role. Now, Marcus Carr and I'm not talking about the Marcus Carr role of Texas. I'm talking about the Marcus Carr role of Minnesota, where his usage rate is going to be super high. He's going to take any shot that he wants. He's going to have a really nice cast around him. I think we might see Max, his assist numbers take a nice spike. Defensively, I think he'll still average over a steal. I think his 3-point numbers won't suffer too bad being in this conference. He has guys around him. He's going to have opportunities because if you let a guy like Dessou go one-on-one down low, he's got those post moves. Reminds me a lot of freshman season Isaiah Stewart from a couple of years ago. He gets it down on the block one-on-one. He's going to score. That's just a guarantee. So double team's going to be coming in the low post a lot. Max is going to have his opportunity, and they're also going to need Tyrese Hunter to be able to knock down threes out of those double teams as well. Other guys that they're bringing in, lesser known perhaps, Kendall Weaver, who I actually am pretty bullish on, maybe not right away, but he was a really solid point guard for UT Arlington, somebody who kind of like Nick Halmies from Lamar, kind of a semi-jack of all trades, but a really good scorer, really good shooter, shot over 40% from long range a season ago. You really have this situation here again where that low block, if it gets doubled, you've got a guy like Weaver who can shoot threes. You got a guy like Max. They bring in Ethiel Horton, who has been around the block a few times. Horton shot 35% from long range. They bring back Brock Cunningham, who can shoot a little bit from the outside. They have some pieces here. And then they also got a UTEP transfer, Zarik Anyema, to kind of help with the Dessou, Caden Shedrick, Brock Cunningham, like to kind of just back up, give you another rebounder, a guy that can fill space down low. Speaking of Caden Shedrick, we'll see health-wise and if he's going to be good to go and ready to play right away. Because if not, there's going to be some trouble abound here for the depth. This is another team where I think depth is going to be an issue. Looking at their roster, though, I really like their starting five, the potential starting five, I should say. I'm really, really bullish on this team. I might be a little bit partial. Texas has really become a team that I like because of what they did for us last season. But the potential, 7-8 man rotation. You're talking about Mad Max. You're talking about Tyrese Hunter, Dylan Mitchell, Dessou, Caden Shedrick, just, assuming everything's all good, Ethiel Horton. And then if they got it after Horton, because, that's a pretty good 6. And then after Horton, it gets a little bit dicey. You need Kendall Weaver to be able to play at this next level. You need Brock Cunningham to give you solid minutes, which he has done in the past. And then you look at the rest of the roster and you need one of perhaps these freshmen, Chris Johnson, Devin Pryor. How much is the Anyema kid going to give them? Probably not a ton. So there is some potential for DFS wise. Yeah, they're playing 38, 39, 40 minutes a night. But, oh, man, these guys' legs are dead. They're gassed out. We're in the third week of conference play, and suddenly Mad Max is shooting 26% from long range in conference play. Not the greatest when it comes to depth. And depth is probably a little overrated anyways in college basketball. I should admit that, even though I do kind of get enamored with depth at times. But you definitely don't want to wear your guys out too fast. So this is a very interesting Texas team. And also Rodney Terry is going to have to prove that he can actually coach with some of his own guys and with a full season under his belt, take them to that next level and be able to build on the success that last year was. So we'll see. As long as Dylan Dessou is healthy, though, this team is based. Super, super based. Chris Johnson, probably the only freshman on the team that we can look at for DFS purposes, by the way. 4-star, somebody that, depending on how the rest of the next couple of weeks go, could be thrust into some spot starts early on as well. All right, we'll move on to the next team here. The Baylor Bears. Now, Scott Drew is in his 21st season as coach, which is just crazy to think about. He's another one of those coaches that I just don't count out. And I know Baylor has been hit or miss at times the last couple of seasons, but as long as they have that guy as their coach, you just have to respect and never really pick against them because they are well coached. They have a lot of talent, and they're going to compete every night. Mentioned they lost LJ Cryer to Houston, Key George to the NBA, Adam Flagler's gone, Flo Famba is finally gone, but that's a big chunk of the production. That is 45, 50, almost 55 real points gone. That's a ton of production to have to replace. Now they went out to the transfer portal and they got Ray J. Dennis from Toledo, high volume kid who can score the hell out of the basketball. Jaden Nunn transferring in from VCU. Nunn's a really sneaky piece here because he's a 41% three-point shooter, which I also think will surprise some people. He's a little bit more known for his defense. He's nails on defense, but he can also knock down threes, and I think he fits into this Baylor system very well. And Baylor, you mentioned Bill Self's at his best when he has a scoring center that he can really rely on. Baylor's at their best when they're able to execute that 3-guard lineup that they won a title with. And you're looking at this roster right now, Jaden Nunn and Ray J. Dennis. Yes, there's 2 who's going to be that third? Is it going to be Langston Love? Is he going to be healthy and build on, some of the potential he showed? D'Antoine Grimes, who, he's going to be healthy. Is it going to be him? Does Jacoby Walter just come in as a freshman? And does he take that third spot, kind of a tweener guard or a wing? Miro Little, another freshman that I'm kind of excited about. So there's a nice little mix of youth here and veterans. Now that's my preferred roster, or I think optimal. It's not a roster, obviously, that's full of one and dones. We know that's kind of past, but also not a roster full of just veterans, because you still need some athleticism. You still need a little bit of that youth. And I think Baylor sets up really nicely with the way that they're set up. Not only with the transfers that came in and Nunn and Ray J. Dennis, but those freshmen, those highly rated recruits, Jacob Walter, and Miro Little. Those two will compete right away for big minutes. Now, our guy, Jonathan Chachua, or as I like to refer to him as Everyday John, does return. Now, Everyday John, health has been the problem for him. And he didn't look great ending the season last year. He was a value play of mine that I really like to use, but it got to the point where you couldn't really use him because he just wasn't himself. Now, coming into this season, I believe they're going to have to use him a lot. Flo Thamba's gone. Flo Thamba, not a big scorer, but he ate up minutes. He defended well. He rebounded well. JTT, Everyday John's going to fill that role, and I do think he's going to be a viable option and somebody who is going to be a underpriced option that most people maybe overlook because they don't think that he's going to contribute or score anything. And with the amount of guards on this team that can compete and can score and will get the defensive attention, Everyday John's going to be able to kind of run unimpeded on the block, and it's not going to have a lot of defensive attention and get behind the defense and get some easy putbacks and make some plays on defense, and they're going to reward him for that. That's one thing that I do get excited about. I think we just got to keep him healthy, right? And as long as he is healthy and gets a lot of minutes, he's definitely somebody that we're going to be able to rely on. Jalen Bridges comes back for another season. You saw a pretty nice season for him, 10.6 rebounds. They'll be looking for him to take that next step forward. And then Caleb Lohner, who was really good, old Sunshine there at BYU, and somebody who I thought was really going to compete here for Baylor. But he's had his games, but in year two, he's really going to have to step up. I think the position change was tough for him when BYU's in the WCC. He's playing more of a center role there. And then in the Big 12, where there's a ton of bigger, taller players, he had to play more of a wing. And I think that messed up his game and made it to where he just wasn't comfortable and he couldn't play that spot. Now he's had a year to do that. I do think he's going to be somebody who plays more minutes and we can maybe use as a sub 5K value play type of guy. So Caleb Lohner, also possibly a sneak. I like that. I think the Baylor guards, they'll get so much attention from people that the Baylor post players are going to be low owned, low roster. They're going to be cheaper, and we're going to be able to probably surprise some people there. They also have the Josh Ojiwana kid, who will take a lot of the potential minutes too. Let's say Everyday John, God forbid, can't be healthy. Josh Ojiwana will play a lot of minutes in kind of a Flo Thamba role. Baylor, to a lesser extent, needs at least a capable big man to kind of keep the defenses somewhat honest and rebound at a high level, and that's somebody who could potentially do some things for them now. But if my man Everyday John is going to be healthy and is going to play at a high level and is going to be a leader for this team, then watch out. He's going to be very, very big. The knee injury that he suffered, it really held him back. But coming out of this offseason, there's a lot of talk about how he's cut weight, thinner, leaner version. He's kind of worked on his 3-point shooting. He made 40% of his threes last year, but that was kind of deceiving because he only took like 15, right? There is talk about him adding that to his game on a more consistent basis. So I am really excited about the Everyday John aspect to this roster for sure. And then with the freshmen, it'll just depend on what they're priced at. I don't think Miro Little will be an option right away. But I do think Jacob Walter is somebody who will be a lot like Key George in that when he comes in there, he's going to score a bunch. He's going to be a higher volume scorer, somebody that they probably let burn through the non-con and get confidence and be ready for the Big 12 grind of conference schedule. So this is a fun Baylor team, definitely, and there's going to be a lot of usable options. Pricing is going to dictate where we go in this roster. I think a lot of people expect Ray J. Dennis to come in and just be this like huge volume scorer, but I think he's going to be a lot more of a facilitator here and obviously still hit threes, but I think he ends up facilitating for these other guys and just makes the team better as a whole. All right, let's move on to who do I want to talk about next? Let's talk about TCU, the Horned Frogs. Now we're getting into some teams that I'm just really excited about because not necessarily expected to be some kind of conference winner or Final Four team, but TCU has the opportunity to be a fun tourney team nonetheless. And losing Eddie Lampkin, Shahada Wells, Damian Bow, who I loved, and Mike Miles, that's a ton. And Miles, their top scorer, really kind of just pushed them along. When he wasn't in there, you saw how stagnant the offense got. But this TCU team did a very nice job in the portal. They retooled a ton. And it starts with Jameer Nelson Jr. And if you feel as old as I do hearing the name Jameer Nelson Jr., then you know it's getting crazy for us with some of the kids that are coming out, some of the players we watched as kids. Now their kids are playing collegiate basketball, their kids are playing pro basketball, and it's truly weird. So it wasn't that long ago that Jameer Nelson and Delonte West were crushing it for St. Joe's, and now we got Jameer Nelson Jr. coming up. For Delaware, Nelson was an absolute stud. Averaged over 20 points per game, almost 5 rebounds, did average about 4 assists as well, over 2.5 steals per game, shot about 44%. His three-point shooting right around 31%. Not great, not awful. This is one, you're going to hear people talk about all the time, like up transfer. So going from a team like Delaware up to TCU, there's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be something he's gonna struggle at first. Now, he did play for George Washington at the beginning of his career for a couple of seasons, which that's not the super high major either, but he does have experience playing against upper tier teams, and I don't think that there's going to be this situation for him where he comes in and gets shocked by the competition. I think he will absolutely play at a high level and is going to torture opposing defenses in this conference. You look at his efficiency numbers last year, 9th highest usage rate in the country, 31% shot rate, assist rate of 24%. In conference, he had the 4th highest assist rate, top 40 steal rate, very good defender, drew over 6.5 fouls per 40, shot 78% from the foul line. So one of those guys in late game situations that's going to rack up points for us. I love Jameer Nelson, actively getting him in season long dynasty, all that stuff. He's going to be great on this team. Absolutely great. There was a scrimmage. Let me get this pulled up as well, because I want to make sure I give you guys all the secret scrimmage stuff. So there's, again, a ton of exhibition, a ton of secret scrimmage stuff. Yesterday, there was not a secret scrimmage, but a super secret scrimmage, according to Jeff Goodman, where TCU played Alabama. Alabama was missing several pieces like Mark Sears. But TCU beat Alabama 85-81. Not necessarily go run out and be like, oh my God, TCU. The freshman for Alabama, Sam Walter, 29, are talking like he's going to be like the best player ever, but we got to keep it in mind they were missing 3 or 4 players. He's not going to be hitting 7 threes per game. Jameer Nelson had 25 points and 6 assists in that game. Now, I know I just got done saying, like, hey, Sam Walter did this in the exhibition. Don't read into it. But then I'm sitting here telling you Jameer Nelson did this in the exhibition. Read into it. Role's a little bit different. TCU was only missing TCU was missing players too, but it wasn't at the guard spot. PV, I guess. And Nelson he was incredible. Jacoby Coles also looked solid. I'll talk about him in a second. But Jameer Nelson, and I tweeted this out earlier, Jameer Nelson most posh play of the day designations for 23-24. Meaning likely Jameer Nelson is going to be the posh play of the day more than anyone else this season. I'm already making that declaration. That could certainly change as the season goes on, especially if people understand and realize like, hey, Jameer Nelson is good. We got to roster this guy at 7K. Like, I can already tell you, Jameer Nelson, like, you guys know the posh play of the day. The money range for posh play of the day is usually 6'5" to 8'2". And I love those ones that fall in like the 7-7 range, because people usually just say, okay, I'm just going to pay up to 9K for player X, or I'm going to pay down to 5.5 for player C. Jameer Nelson's just going to fall in that price range that people are going to look up or down, but not at him. And he's going to put up these 40s for us. He's going to put up these 35s for us. He's going to have a couple 50s. I just am so excited about Jameer Nelson. Honestly, there's a handful of players that I feel really, really good about this season, and he's near the top of that list. Just an incredible amount of potential for him on this roster. Okay, I misspoke. Avery Anderson was out of the scrimmage as well. Now, that obviously affects some things, but I think Nelson's going to be the alpha on this team. I feel pretty confident in that. Which leads me into, yes, they did bring in Avery Anderson from Oklahoma State. Anderson has been a pretty high usage guy throughout the course of his career. He started out as a role player back in like pre-COVID season, so he's been around for a good amount of time. Has that experience. The Oklahoma State teams that he started getting more and more minutes on, Cade Cunningham team, is really where Avery Anderson started to kind of come into his own and be a reliable player. Last year, 25.6% usage rate, assist rate over 25%, 3.5% steal rate, drew over 5 fouls per 40, 83% free throw shooter. So a lot of similarities to Nelson there. High usage scorer, great passer, not a very good three-point shooter. That is something that he struggled on mightily last year. He shot 18%. That's not a mistake. That's not me, using any hyperbole. He literally was awful shooting the three, 11 for 61. The year before that, 33%, decent. The year before that, 33%, decent. His freshman season, he shot 2 of 26. So he's probably a true 30% shooter, just had struggles last year, also missed games on and off here. In that Oklahoma State system, I don't know. It wasn't the best for him, I don't think. I think TCU, he'll do much better, and it fits his play style a lot more as well. So they have a very nice backcourt here, 2 upperclassmen in Avery Anderson and Jameer Nelson. They also bring in from Coastal Carolina, Sam Mustafa. Now, Coastal Carolina has had a ton of they do it right. They bring in kind of cast-off high major players to their program. They have guys leave their program to go to high majors. Their team last year was actually really talented. I don't know how they didn't win more games. Mustafa, a 24.4% defensive rebounding rate, 13% offensive rebounding rate, both of those top 75 in the country. High free throw rate, block rate solid. Just a really nice low post player that I think will be able to give them some valuable minutes. Now, they do bring in the Kansas transfer as well, these intra-conference transfers. I'm a big transfer portal guy. I know a lot of people, they hate it. I love transfers. But one thing that does bug me, and maybe that's the old school part of me from the 90s, like, you just don't transfer in your conference. Go transfer out of conference, be somewhere else. Transferring in conference just seems so just bad. But Ernest Uday transfers here to TCU. So he's going to have the opportunity to, develop further, get some time to make mistakes, still get to play those minutes, even if he does make mistakes. They have Emmanuel Miller, who is going to be a bona fide, semi-star for this TCU team. Miller kind of started to show out last year and really showed that, hey, he's got the opportunity to, possibly be a conference, first teamer, somebody who is going to be very, very important to this squad. And I don't think he'll get enough, consideration for that or respect, but he's definitely, at least for fantasy purposes, somebody we need to pay attention to. His price started to get out of control there a bit last year. We'll see what it resets at this season. But he's going to really benefit from having all of these really good guards around him that can get him the ball and put him in a position to score. He's also, kind of undersized, can definitely bang down low, had a solid enough rebounding rate, but a 39% three-point shooter as a kind of 4 undersized 5 at times. Definitely the leader of this team, at least from the returning standpoint, and somebody that's going to mean a whole hell of a lot to them. They also bring in Trevion Tennyson. If you remember Tennyson, he was on that Texas A&M Corpus Christi team that did get to play deep into March. That team was actually pretty good. They did beat Southeast Missouri State, and then they proceeded to lose to Alabama, but it was actually close for a while. It's not like they lost by 40 or anything. But Tennyson, a 28% shot rate, 42% three-point shooter, so they do, and a 91% free throw shooter. So they do bring in a kid who's going to be able to, contribute right away as a shooter. I don't know that he's going to be well equipped to handle big minutes in this conference, but at least they can use him as a role player that can shoot. And that particular Corpus Christi team had several guys transfer up to high major teams, including Isaac Muschella, who went to New Mexico. So a nice little group here. Jace Posey is their main freshman, and Isaiah Manning. It seems like it might be tough for those guys to get minutes, at least initially. Other players who could be considered role players with upside for more production. Micah Peavy, who, believe it or not, is technically now a senior. Xavier Cork, who is a high motor kid. Hate using that term, but how else can I describe Xavier Cork? Last year in spot starts due to injury when Lampkin just couldn't get healthy. Cork was a very viable fantasy option and somebody who put up a pretty decent fantasy point per minute number. And then speaking of fantasy point per minute numbers, Jacob Coles, he is awesome. Give me Coles minutes this year, please. He had a really, really high fantasy point per minute in conference play. He's somebody that I feel like deserves playing 25 minutes a game. Can we get that for him? I think so. Let me get his rates in front of me. So 26% shot rate, 24% usage rate, 33% three-point shooter. That's okay. A little undersized for the post, a little bit not unskilled, but a little bit too unpolished. Needs some refining as a wing. Block rate of almost 4%. Shot 80% from the foul line. You gotta love your guys who can step to the line there and bang down low. Offensive rebounding rate 10%. Combined rebounding rate of almost 30%. Really, really strong. I love Jacob Coles. I think he has the opportunity to be a really nice, sneaky option. When he was at Butler, he didn't do a whole lot there, but there were flashes in the short amount of time. The season before last at TCU, he started kind of coming into his own, getting those minutes, and then last year it really took off for him. So the way his career has gone and the trajectory, he should be in for a semi-breakout this year. And you look at that secret scrimmage, 18 points, 9 rebounds. He looked very good against that Alabama team. And that was the Alabama team that's going to use a lot of Grant Nelson, who I'm actually pretty low on. We'll talk about in the SEC show next week. He kind of made, his mark there. So I love the Cole, Nelson, Anderson trio there with Emmanuel Miller. Charles O'Bannon also returns. He is usually overpriced for what he does, but he's definitely going to, play over 20 minutes and be a guy that contributes to this team. So TCU is looking like, we haven't talked about too many deep teams just yet in this conference. TCU is definitely a team that's going to have depth, and they're going to use it in a way that is going to still benefit us as DFS players and sports bettors because Jameer Nelson should play a lot. Avery Anderson should play a lot. Where you're going to see kind of the revolving door is at positions, 3, 4, and 5. The O'Bannon spot, the Uday spot, PV will come in there, Coles will come in there, Mustafa. It's going to water down a lot of that fantasy production. So we really want to hone in on the guard spots, the starting guards, especially with Anderson, Nelson, who are going to play a lot. with a little bit of Emmanuel Miller. But I do like this TCU team probably more than most. I think TCU has a chance to make a surprise like Sweet 16, appearance. I think Coach Dixon is very good. Doesn't get enough credit for what he does and the talent that he has, and honestly, he's able to get more out of less, quite a bit more than he gets credit for. So this is going to be a fun TCU squad for sure. All right, let's move along here. Kansas State. This is another team. I'm not going to pat myself on the back anymore. I did it far enough on Kansas State, but the Kansas State, their own fans last year were like, man, it's going to be an NIT season. And I was like, I don't know, this Kansas State team, they got some talent. They're really good. And what do you know? They go to the Elite Damn 8. Now, I didn't see that coming, but I saw them having a winning year and going to the tournament. Marquise Noel, great season. Man, he was fun. Keontae Johnson, that's a great story. Thought he would never play basketball again. Shot 41% from long range. Really, those two early in the season were just smash plays over and over and over. KJ kind of fizzled out towards the end, but Marquise Noel, man, tournament hero for sure. Ishmael Massoud and Desi Sills, role players, are gone. Now, losing a player of Noel's caliber, somebody who, defensively averaged 3 steals, really valuable on that end, but also an 18-point per game score and almost 9 assists per game. There were games where Noel was popping 50, 60 fantasy points. You don't just replace that with ease. However, I got to give Coach Tang, Jerome Tang, credit because he went to the portal last year and he did a phenomenal job in year 1. Now he comes into it. Hey, you did great, but is this a blip? Can you do it again? Goes to the portal. When you have a situation where you were able to take guys like KJ and Marquise Noel and say, hey, look, gave them this opportunity. Now, KJ came from a high major program, so maybe less him, but Marquise Noel, who came from, a lower major team, got put in the situation where he plays heavy minutes, high usage, runs the team, and succeeds. It was an easy sell for a guy like Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry comes from North Texas as an absolute star, upperclassman, took him some time to develop. He's kind of a Mighty Mouse stature, similar to Marquise Noel. Now, he's not the same kind of passer. He doesn't have the assist rate. He's a much more volume-esque type scorer, but he can hit threes with anybody, 42% from long range. Different type of player in that regard because of the lack of assists per se. But Tyler Perry's going to have a big season in a Kansas State uniform. Very, very confident in that. They also bring in Keith Glover, who has been around the block, if you will. Most recently came from Samford. Now, I really liked what Samford had on their team last year with Keith Glover, Bubba Barham, both with high major experience. Now, Keith played for Florida early in his career for a couple of seasons. You won't remember that because it was, pretty lackadaisical. He just played spot minutes, was a bench piece, but a really big 2022 for Samford. Injuries kind of robbed him last year, but he still had high usage rate, high shot rate, shot 36% from long range. He's hovered around low 30s for most of his career. In the 2022 season, number 1 usage rate in the conference, number 1 shot rate, number 2 assist rate, top 20 steal rate, and top 5 in the fouls drawn category. Just one of the best guards in the Southern Conference for 2022. He's going to come into a situation here where people aren't really talking about him, but I do think he's going to get big minutes. Now, projected starting lineups, they've got this youngster, Day Ames, coming in, who is probably going to get a fair amount of those minutes. RJ Jones, another freshman. But I think Keese, as an upperclassman, maybe doesn't start out as the guy next to Perry in the backcourt, but I do think he ends up working his way into the starting lineup very, very quickly if he doesn't start out there. The backcourt of Glover and Perry, to me, is a lot better than people are probably going to give it credit for. I think the Jameer Nelson, Avery Anderson backcourt is better, but Perry can score and Glover can definitely pass and has facilitated and has been somewhat productive at this higher major level as well. Like I said, at Florida, he had less of a role, but when he did come in on the second team, he wasn't a liability. Let's put it that way. So I really like what I'm seeing for this team. They also bring in Arthur Kaluma, comes in from Creighton. I know a lot of people were shocked that he decided to leave Creighton. I think this is a great opportunity for him to have a season much like Key Johnson. He's going to be able to shoot threes as a tweener wing post player. He's going to be able to play a ton of minutes. He's going to get all the shots he can possibly handle next to Tyler Perry. Rebounding numbers might suffer a little bit with Nate Tomlin around, but I think overall Kaluma is going to be a really nice fit for this roster and somebody who is going to be a real problem for opposing defenses to really try to contain, especially if he continues to rise as a three-point shooter. I think Cam Carter, we have a logjam at this guard spot. Like looking at it, Cam Carter still a to me more on the role player side, but he's gonna have to probably take over games at times if Tyler Perry gets into foul trouble. Defenses are paying too much attention to him. Cam Carter can't afford to just be a hang around in the corner guy this season. He's going to have to take on more of a role, especially if Glover just isn't able to make the transition back to the P5 level. The freshman Day Ames, like I said, I think he's going to have to play minutes as well. He is a very good offensive creator, granted high school level, and he's able to break people down in one-on-one situations to the point where he could potentially be like a first or second team All-American type guard, depending on how things shake out here in his development. Nate Tomlin back. Nate Tomlin, very unsung hero, somebody who we were using late in the season, can rebound, can play defense, just kind of did his thing. People watch games and then they go to the box score and be like, wow, Nate Tomlin, he had 15 points and 8 rebounds. Like when did that happen? Very, very good. Like him a lot. Think pricing, the only issue with him is pricing is going to be tough, I think. I don't foresee him being very cheap very often. And you saw last year, once he really started to get it going, DK made his price up to mid 7K and it just never really came down. David Ngesson back. That's a value play potential there. Somebody who got roughly 15 to 18 minutes throughout the season. Played more of a role late. Was playing 25, 26 minutes per game. Somebody who potentially is a starter for this team as well. I think Jarrell Colbert is a very interesting name to know. Taj Manning, who is a redshirt freshman. I think Taj Manning, a lot of people are expecting him to potentially do some things this year and kind of fill a scorer, jack of all trades combination role. That's what I've been looking at people and beats talking about him. Colbert, a lot of potential from him. Ended up sitting out the majority of the season last year, comes into this season with the idea of he's going to have to earn minutes, but I think it'll start slow for him. Maybe the first couple of games, 5 to 10 minutes, and then that role builds, especially if health becomes an issue at any time for a guy like Nate Tomlin, which it might. But this team is going to be built around their guards and how successful they are. So DFS-wise, it's going to start with Tyler Perry. It's going to start with Keith Glover, and then we'll work our way from there. But I want to see how a guy like Perry, high usage player, paired up with a wing / interior like Kaluma, who would want to be a high usage player, can mesh. Last year's roster, to me, it made a lot of sense. I thought it would mesh well because everybody had a really specific role. This roster, I don't see as clearly defined roles for everybody, and I see a little bit of a logjam at guard that may kind of cause problems for that DFS side. Let me see if I can pull this up. Now, Kansas State had a secret scrimmage. I've had this already pulled up. They had a secret scrimmage with SMU. course, I'm probably not going to be able to pull it up now. And Tyler Perry had just 9 points, kind of struggled. SMU actually beat them now. SMU, we'll talk about them during a different show, but they looked pretty damn good. Kansas State, definitely a team that was also missing people. I'm not going to be able to pull up the box score for that. But in that one, just to kind of reiterate, Keith Glover had a nice little 11 point, 5 assist game. Did operate as the starter in the backcourt next to Tyler Perry. So if that's any indication, he could be in for a nice role here. And I just don't think a lot of people are going to be talking about him at all. All right, moving on to the next team here, we'll talk about the Iowa State Cyclones. I think Iowa State will, under TJ Otts, see a really nice increase in fantasy viability, yes, but also wins. And this is another team that I would not be surprised about playing in the second weekend of the tournament. The team solid last year, a lot of good but not great players, right? Caleb Grill, Kunk, Oshuni, one of our guys from St. Bonaventure, Jaron Holmes, Cade Calshore, who, Jesus, man, if I wouldn't have been as plugged in as I am and you told me Gabe Kalshire is playing again, I would have probably believed it because he's just around forever, but gone as well. This Iowa State team, it feels a little different. They're going to still have solid depth like they had last season, but there's clearly guys on this roster that are going to be higher in the pecking order. And instead of this, some days it's Caleb Grill, some days it's Jaron Holmes, some day it's, I think we're going to have a really clearly defined pecking order. And that's what I like about this Cyclones team coming in. And they have some really nice names that they brought in from the transfer portal. But the player I'm most excited about is actually a returner, and that's Tamin Lipsey. Played 30 minutes a game last year, 20% three-point shooter, nothing exciting there, but super raw. But he got to play through mistakes. He got to really get comfortable. Otts clearly wants him to, run this team, and he's going to have that opportunity. And I think you see those minutes, spike 35, 36. His assist numbers should spike. Three-point shooting, you hope that increases as well, but he's going to have some legitimate three-point shooters around him. And he's going to be an absolute stud. Known for his defense, going to be a lot like DeJuan Harris level defender, but he's going to really affect things on both sides. And I think he has, I don't want to get too crazy with the hyperbole, but I think he has the opportunity to work himself into a potential first-round draft pick. Somebody who has a lot of Tyrese Halliburton-like qualities. I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to say that today, but I think he does. I think we're going to see, and Halliburton, obviously he had to score and he was a much better three-point shooter, but it doesn't mean Lipsey can't work himself into being that way. Defensively and as a passing ability goes, I think Lipsey, he's very, very good in that regard. And if he can work on being at least semi-decent three-point shooter, he's going to be a very special player. So Lipsey is the guy that I'm all over for this team. He's definitely my guy for this roster. They bring in a few transfers here. Sean Gilbert from UNLV, Curtis Jones from Buffalo, and Jackson Pavletsky from Wofford. Now, Gilbert shot about 39% from long range, which they need on this roster. Curtis Jones about 36%, Pavletsky 39%. So all three of those transfers in mind, there was something very clear that Otts wanted to do, and that was surround Lipsey with guys who could knock down threes. Jones, more of a volume shooter at Buffalo, had the green light to chuck. By far, took almost 8 threes a game. But definitely somebody when he's out on the floor is going to be a threat, somebody that they have to pick up. Keyshawn Gilbert, I think, has probably the most upside between him and Curtis Jones. I think Jones right now, if you needed a bucket, Jones is more the guy to go out and do that for you. But I think overall, Gilbert's going to be more of a factor for this team. And then Pavelski, you know, from Wofford, he really had to do everything, essentially. Somebody who I don't question being able to compete at the Big 12 level. I mean, he is the freshman of the year from the SoCon. SoCon has some good players. But I don't know. Defensively, I think he's going to struggle a bit. And I kind of feel like people think he's going to step in and just immediately be this guy who, gets big minutes, scores. He scored 15 points a game last year, scores these big points. And I'm not so sure. I worry most out of the 3 transfers. He's the one I'm worried most about maybe struggling initially. But the good news is for him, they have several guards on this roster that are upperclassmen, so he won't have to. I think the conversation around Pavelski will be much different next year than it is this season. And this portal stuff that you saw, the SoCon, the Southland, the freshman of the year from those conferences all got the call from higher major teams. So this is the way of the life. Other guys that are returning: Hassan Ward, Robert Jones, Trey King. All 3 of those guys just, they fill a role for post and interior. They have their viability at times, their value pieces. They're not guys you really build your lineups around. So I don't have a lot of excitement about them. Trey King definitely has shown in the past he can put up some fantasy points in a hurry, but consistency definitely lacking when it comes to his abilities there. But as an upperclassman and somebody who's going to play a role, obviously want to be aware. 5-star freshman Omaha Baloo, that is a really, really good player that you need to be aware of because he's going to end up forcing his way into big minutes. Going to be a very great borderline elite rebounder, somebody who they'll be able to, as far as versatility goes, he's going to be able to guard opposing centers. He's going to be able to guard opposing 2 guards. Like, he has that kind of athleticism. Sometimes it'll be a bit of a shock when you first get into the collegiate, level, but this is a kid who is able to guard multiple positions. NBA scouts are going to be just drooling over him. Lipsy is going to be able to turn him into. There's going to be some fun stuff happening between those guys. Like, we're going to get some fast break stuff out of those 2. That's going to be like, amazing. We're going to be talking about. It's just the Big 12 is super tough, and there's grown-ass men in the front court and on the perimeter. So I don't know that it's going to take him time, but he is a name that we need to know. Defensively, this Iowa State team, and that's the other thing, when they're on the slate, we can definitely use their pieces, but going against them is going to be a tough proposition. This defense, to me, looks like there's going to be very few weaknesses, and targeting guys against them might be a losing proposition, and that might be an edge where somebody comes in red hot. It's going to be super chalky, but hey, we know Iowa State's defense. They're containing people. Let's back off and fade this 40% owned kid. Has a slow, borderline terrible game. We're way ahead of the field. So I don't want to roster too many guys against this Iowa State team, I think, right now. I think that they're going to be really, really solid. Defensively, it's going to be a problem. Another freshman that they have that will be primed for minutes probably sooner rather than later, Milan Momsilicevic, top 50 prospect. Obviously Baloo is going to be the guy that gets talked about, but Milan, a 3-point shooter, another guy who will be asked to play some minutes and give Lipsy another option to break down the defense and hit. Certainly a upper tier 3-point shooter, at least from the high school level. So I like the way this team is built. This team is built with a very specific type of offense in mind, and there are another team with a great combination of upperclassmen and freshmen who are going to be able to play off each other. Don't sleep on this Iowa State team. That would be a mistake for sure. And Otts is a good coach, man. It's a lot of good coaches in this Big 12. Go figure. All right, Texas Tech Red Raiders. Grant McCaslin comes in as the first-year coach. Man, it's been a kind of a wacky a time for Texas Tech. From the Chris Beard era to what they have now, and McCaslin comes in after a really stellar run at North Texas. Coming off an NIT championship, that North Texas team won 31 games last year, and pretty much their starting five, well, four of them got to transfer up to high major teams. NIT the last 2 years, but over 25 wins in each of the last 2 seasons. A couple of years ago, they were in the second round of the NCAA AA tournament. So we have a really intriguing guy here in McCaslin, who I think will do well for Texas Tech, but it's going to take some time to really kind of rebuild the image of the Red Raiders, because they've had some drama. They've had some miscues. They've had guys like Mark Adams, who was not the guy, was not the guy. And we have this, reputation for Texas Tech of being a very elite defense and not being a team to really target against for DFS purposes. And McCaslin comes in, should be able to carry on that tradition, and really we look at his North Texas teams. Pull up some of this. Defensively, they're usually always strong. If you go to their Ken Palm page, look at defensive efficiency. 4 of the last 5 years, top 50 defensive efficiency. And you can look at it and see how they held their opponents, especially in conference play. Granted, CUSA is not the Big 12, but the North Texas Mean Green were one heck of a defense and not a team that really gave up a ton of fantasy points to the opposition very often. Now, he does have to reset the deck a little bit. Daniel Batcho is gone off to Louisiana Tech. Vardas and Jalen Tyson both off to Cal. Talked about them yesterday. Davian Harmon gone, and then Kevin O gone. Finally, gonna miss him. He's a fun guy, but he's gone. They do bring in a plethora of transfers here. McCaslin, it's a little bit surprising, maybe to a degree, that he couldn't get some of his North Texas guys, but they got offers from programs probably in a slightly better spot than Texas Tech, at least initially. But it went out, gets Joe Toussaint from West Virginia, Darian Williams from Nevada, Warren Washington and Devin Cambridge from Arizona State, Kyron Lindsey from Georgia, and Chance McMillan from Grand Canyon. So none of those guys are stars, but they're viable, usable pieces that can definitely contribute. And there's going to be a chance here for a pecking order to develop and kind of be almost a fresh, clean, blank slate for some of these players to reinvent themselves. The main returner is Pop Isaacs, who's, next to Toussaint, the backcourt likely of the year for this team. Isaacs, everyone on Texas Tech last year struggled with injuries, health. Isaacs was no different, but assuming he can be healthy, play over 30 minutes per game, build on his 38% three-point shooting, and become a reliable, lethal scorer, he has a chance to be really nice for this team. And looking at guards for North Texas under McCaslin, there's been some good ones, right? Kai Huntsberry, obviously Tyler Perry, Reuben Jones, who's kind of like a super role player, hitting threes. Mardez McBride, the same. He ended up playing for Georgia. James Reese, Javion Hamlet. Like, these have all over the years been really good fantasy options and players who just really thrived. Emoja Gibson played for McCaslin for a few season. So with guard development, and I think we're probably looking at a nice season for Isaacs overall. Still have Kerwin Walton and Demarion Williams, but at this point in their career, not really looking at them as anything more than role players at best. Lamar Washington comes in still just a sophomore. I think he has a lot of untapped potential as well. He's going to have to improve his shooting for sure. but he has defensive ability, and there's upside there. And I like the idea of McCaslin working with him. I like the idea of Kyron Lindsey coming in from Georgia as a young, kind of bigger guard, who McCaslin can work with. He's somebody who can definitely shoot. Chance McMillan, I really like. He was at 11 points per game scorer, 44% three-point shooter at Grand Canyon. Another guy that to me kind of feels like that Kai Huntsberry role from last year for North Texas, is a guy that played multiple positions on the perimeter and the wing, could shoot a little bit, high usage rate, solid enough passer. So to me, I feel like he's going to definitely thrive here. And if you look at his Grand Canyon numbers, because he's probably my second favorite on this team here. 42% three-point shooter, 21% shot rate, top, let's see, in the conference, top 5 in true shooting percentage, drew 3 fouls per 40. Definitely a guy that I think can compete here on this team and get an opportunity to play heavy minutes. And I don't think really any of the guys on this team initially are going to have very high price points. Maybe Devin Cambridge or Joey T, just because of where they come from. But I think we'll have McMillan, Lindsey, probably Lamar Washington, guys who are going to be on the cheaper side that we'll be able to probably use in this system. I do feel pretty good about guards under McCaslin for what it's worth. And Warren Washington, 7-footer, as my old buddy Johnny would say, you can't coach height, Walt. You just can't coach height. It's his 4th program, though, and he's definitely capable of a guy to, double-digit rebounds, 3 or 4 blocks, like very good rim protector, and he can score a little bit too. So I'm interested to see how Warren Washington does for this team. But offensively, I do feel like he might be a little more limited in this system, as it's going to be very guard heavy. All right, let's move on to the next tiers of teams. We'll start swinging through here. Oklahoma State. Mike Boynton in year 7. Gotta bring it now, sir. Gotta bring it. Mo Cisse gone, Tyreek Smith, Caleb Asbury, Caleb Boone, and Avery Anderson, of course. Now they do replace that with several transfers. Isaiah Miranda from NC State, who's still young, ton of potential. North Texas transfer, and Jarius Hicklin. Mike Marsh, who's a Jacksonville transfer, and Javon Small from East Carolina. Freshman Eric Daly, Brandon Garrison, and Justin McBride. I do think out of IMG Academy, Eric Daly, he is somebody that we want to kind of focus on. The freshman with the most potential to play and be a relevant fantasy option quick. Isaiah Miranda, 7'1", by the way. Late, just the potential for him is crazy. I'm feeling pretty good about him here. He's going to make some mistakes, but he's going to be able to play and kind of, anyone that can play through their mistakes and develop somebody we want to focus on, at least for the future, and just keep an eye on, because there's going to be times where we can use him. Javon Small, 16 points per game scorer for East Carolina. Should be a high usage guy in this offense, replacing Avery Anderson. Bryce Thompson comes back for his next year, 37% three-point shooter. Now, Bryce Thompson really kind of developed into a more reliable scorer than any other point in his career last season. Anderson in and out of the lineup. Thompson ended up shooting 37% from long range, which was a career high for him. You look at his previous years with Kansas, which was really a no factor, 21%. And then his first year at Oklahoma State, 29%. That was on 100 attempts. Then he spiked up to 37%. And in conference, he was the 6th best three-point shooter at 39%. So Bryce Thompson, definitely somebody who is going to be looking to build on that season. And in the backcourt, him and Javon Small, I think that has the potential to be a pretty nice one for fantasy purposes. I don't know how many wins they get out of somebody in Bryce Thompson that will be able to use. John Michael Wright returns after shooting 34% last year. Hicklin, the transfer there out of, North Florida, the Ospreys, 13 points per game, 36% three-point shooter. So they're bringing in some three-point shooters. Marsh, a 6'10 center, 10.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, somebody who will get minutes if Miranda is not able to handle a huge 30-minute per game type role. Marsh is there as kind of an insurance policy. All right, moving right on because we do have a few more teams we need to talk about. Cincinnati Bearcats. The Bearcats under Wes Miller, an interesting team. I think that they are going to struggle initially because they're, a lot of these teams are reloading and they're no different. But I do think they didn't do a good enough job replacing Landers Nolly, David Julius, Mika Adams Woods, and Jeremiah Davenport. That's going to be tough. Seamus Lukosius from Butler transfers in. Jameel Reynolds from Temple, although Reynolds sounds very unlikely to get a waiver. Aziz Bandiago, who is seemingly very unlikely to get a waiver as well, up in the air. His first waiver, like many, is been denied, but they're resubmitting. Bandiago, somebody who can really affect the game if he's able to get cleared. 7-footer, you can't coach height, and somebody who this team really needs. Without him, it's going to be kind of tough. Without Jameel Reynolds, also very tough. Now, Bandiago was at Utah Valley, played in that system with Madsen. WAC Defensive Player of the Year. Very, very strong, high caliber player. They need him. Without him, it's going to be very, very tough. But as of now, I just don't know. But you're looking at a team brings on also CJ Frederick, another guy who just couldn't get healthy during his time at Kentucky. 3-point shooter, somebody who's more of a complementary piece, not a focal point. John Newman, it's just not a great roster. Odi Oguama, they do have Victor Lockenbach, who I do like my man Vic, without Nolly around taking all those shots. Jeremiah Davenport going out. I think Locken has the opportunity to kind of average a double-double. Not a massive one, but like a 14-point, 10-rebound type of stat line, which would be fantastic. I do like him. Health issues there for him as well at times, injuries. They do have Jizzle James, who is a highly rated recruit, somebody who could work his way into a big role right away. And then the JUCO transfer, Day Thomas, who out of necessity is also going to have to play a lot of minutes. One player that is interesting, Dan Skillings, only averaged 14 minutes per game last year, but he had some really solid performances in short spurts, especially when injuries popped up. Victor had to miss games. They had to go small. As a freshman, he had several games that kind of stuck out. One against Temple in late February. 28% usage rate in 15 minutes, scored 15 points, hit a couple of threes. It's like, okay, this kid on the radar. Went back to playing 9 minutes. Then he played 22 minutes against Temple again. He's the Temple killer, I guess. 35% usage rate, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal. His best game of his young career, and that really showed what he could potentially be capable of. They tried to get him minutes after that. He took a ton of shots, never got back to that production again, but he is somebody that I feel like could potentially, play a big role in this team, especially if these guys, Reynolds, Bandiago, and just can't get waivers to play. And then also the fact of the freshman, James, and then the JUCO kid, Day, just not being ready to play at this level of Big 12. So that's something to really consider with Skillings. Somebody who I think could potentially be a sneaky DFS piece. Seamus was a strong scoring wing during his time at Butler. He's fine. When cheap, is definitely worth using, but not somebody that is super exciting by any means. I guess I should talk about Jizzle James and then we'll move on. He is Edgerrin James' son, so that's exciting. Um, Freshmen in the Big 12 sometimes struggle. It's a tough conference. It's going to take time to acclimate, but I think looking at this Cincinnati roster and how depleted it could potentially be, we're probably looking at a very, very high minute, high usage role for Jizzle James right away. I think there's going to be some inefficient games, but I think volume wise, he's going to definitely put up some numbers. And if his price is anywhere below 6K, it's probably something that we need to try and exploit. But this roster is a lot of moving pieces and is in flux. We'll see what happens there, but it's not going to probably be a debut for them in a new conference with many wins right away. Oklahoma Sooners. Yes, the Oklahoma Sooners are a team under Porter Moser that we got a lot of and like good solid production out of players from this Oklahoma team. Cheap guys, Milo Suzanne, Otega Aoi, like these guys came through for us quite a bit and became Milos especially became super chalk. Destined to take the next step this year and be a really solid, double-digit scorer. Shot 41% from long range. Already played 30 minutes a game last year as a first-year player. Now he's coming into it for the sophomore season. Look out for a Milo season to probably remember. So I think he's going to be a very important piece. Anytime you throw a freshman out there and you allow him to play through mistakes like Porter did, and Porter, can get mad at his guys and pull the leash back. He didn't do that with Milos, and really quickly he learned how to play collegiate basketball and do it well. And he's already a sophomore, and he's probably the leader of the team, honestly. During Big 12 play, he averaged 9.5 points, and word out of camp said he's added 25 pounds to his frame. So we're going to be looking at a much stronger, bigger Milos who's not going to be afraid to attack, and also, already a good shooter. So sag off him, he's going to burn you, but you come up on him and get on his hip, he's going to be able to play some bully ball this year. So I got to love Milos. Very, very excited and confident in him. And with no Grant Sherfield around, because that's obviously the number one biggest loss for the team. There's a lot of usage and points that are going to need to be replaced. Not only is Grant Sherfield gone, Tanner Groves, Jacob Groves, and Jalen Hill. Those are the key departures. Returners-wise, yes, Milos, definitely that guy. Otega Aoi also back, somebody who, like I said, was getting more minutes, got playing time, didn't get to play through mistakes quite the same that Milos did, but he got that valuable experience. You can expect him to certainly be a big part of the rotation. He was in the starting lineup by the end of the season anyways, somebody who Porter Moser trusts. Basically, I think Otega, they're going to put him in a position to contribute more. They're going to ask him to shoot more. Somebody who I think the industry, not only are we looking at Milos, but everybody's going to be. Ortega's going to be a little more popular, right? And somebody who I think we can get at a low price point, but it's going to play big minutes. Like I just see a lot of minutes in his future already. And once you have a coach like Porter Moser's trust, you're just going to be allowed to play infinite amount of minutes and play through whatever you need to play through. The transfer portal, definitely solid for Oklahoma for the most part. Javian McCollum transfers in from Siena, John Hughley from Pitt, Rivaldo Suarez from Oregon, and Latrey Darthard from Utah Valley. But that's not it. Also Jalen Moore from Georgia Tech and Max Klenchek from Houston Christian. Javian McCollum should step in and be a big-time option right away. Did average 16 points per game last season for a good Siena team, at least for DFS purposes. 4 assists, 36% from long range, over a steal per game. I like him to, partially fill in some of that Grant Shearfield role as well. I do think Milos, of course, like I said, takes that step forward, but McCollum and him will certainly take on that scoring load. A healthy John Hughley could be very, very interesting. We saw Tanner Groves. He played really well under Porter Moser and in this system. No consistency there for parts of the season, but he definitely had some really big games. And I think Hughley, considering how good he showed himself to be in year 2 at Pittsburgh when he wasn't injured all the time, only played 8 games last year before he had to shut it down. I think he can definitely thrive under a coach like Porter Moser. So I'm excited to see what a healthy Hughley can do. Would love to see him become more of a 3-point threat as well and take volume. We'll see Tanner Groves and definitely had a role similar to that. And I think Hughley can absolutely operate in that manner. So I'm on board with using him, especially early on in the season. Latrey Darthard comes from that Utah Valley team that was just fun to watch. Ran a short rotation, did average 14 points per game, about a 36% 3-point shooter. So you see a lot of these teams in the Big 12 Conference went out and added 3-point shooting. That was a big thing. What's up, Valvez? Watching us over on the other network there that we're not very popular on, but we're working on it, right? We're working on it. What's up, man? Thanks for support. But he's going to factor in somebody who will play minutes. Now, it didn't work out. Defense is obviously going to be a really big deal under Porter Moser and in his system. And that's going to determine some of these transfers getting onto the floor. And you look at Darthard, he was definitely out of the Trey Woodbury, Justin Harmon, Trey Darthard, death group that they ran at guard. That was a really good, talk about 3-guard lineup. Like that's a 3-guard lineup that Coach Drew at Baylor would love. But Darthard definitely the plus defender of that group and somebody who should fit in and play the way that Porter Moser likes his guards to play. So Latrey Darthard is somebody certainly not to sneeze at either. The Oregon transfer, Rivaldo Suarez, showed himself to be a productive player at times. Not much of a 3-point shooter, can defend a little bit, can rebound. Certainly somebody who, cheap value at times, yes. I like this Oklahoma team to go about 8 deep, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. There'll be viability out of this bench. I don't know the role of Jalon Moore just yet. He's the one that I'm probably most not indifferent, but kind of feel like he's the most wild card of the transfers. And there's also some waivers at play here, but I like this team for sure. I think Porter Moser has them flirting with a tournament appearance and definitely a group that will be tough to target against because of their defensive prowess. So look out for a return from the Oklahoma Sooners to relevance. All right, West Virginia Mountaineers. Let's start with my guy Ray Battle. Waiver denied for Ray Battle today. Transfer out of Washington to Montana State. He's a 2-time transfer, and if you're not a grad, you can't play without a waiver. You get 1 free transfer, and then when you're a grad transfer, you don't have to sit. So Ray Battle first denial, but that they are resubmitting, and they are trying to get him to play. They definitely need him. He's a guy who I was a big homer for at Washington. My guy, showed flashes, big time scorer, shooter. But once he went to Montana State, it was like took off in a big way. I really liked the opportunity here for him to be a big time scorer and player, but there's a real good chance that he just doesn't get to play. And that's obviously a bummer because he's going to fit in well with this current roster, but if he doesn't get to play, most of these guys are going to be gone because they're upperclassmen. So this is a veteran-laden team that is kind of up in the air right now with the Ray Battle situation. Now we know Josh Eilert's taking over the program. Bob Huggins had issue A, B, and C, no longer around. I think this West Virginia team certainly going to go through some growing pains, but they kind of expedite this process with all these upperclassmen. Now they lose Trey Mitchell, they lose Kedrian Johnson, they lose Eric Stevenson, who I was not a huge fan of anyways, and they lose Jimmy Bell. But they go out and they get Kerr Kriisa from Arizona to play guard. Certainly a solid passer, adequate three-point shooter, good fit for this program. They go get Jesse Edwards, who went from, low usage role player to a dominant low post, presence in the blink of an eye. That's a huge get. Cook from Georgetown as a shot blocker, low post rebounding threat to kind of supplement. Kobe Johnson, back, somebody who is going to get more minutes and has to be able to shoot reliably. Seth Wilson, back, 41% three-point shooter, somebody who's going to have a much bigger role on this program this season. It's looking like they're at the mercy of the waivers because this roster doesn't maybe have the depth that others do. They do have Noah Farrakhan transferring in from Eastern Michigan, although it's up in the air for his status as well. And then a lesser-known transfer in Quinn Slazinski from Iona and Jeremiah Bembry from Florida State. So a lot of new faces for this team, this West Virginia team. They're going to definitely struggle, but the Jesse Edwards experience is going to be fun. Jesse Edwards is going to put up massive numbers in this system, just because it's really unknown how they're going to mesh together. But Edwards didn't go from a 33-minute per game, high usage, double every night role to not play even more for this West Virginia team. So you can rest assured Jesse Edwards is going to remain a viable pay-up option in all formats, and it's the guy that we definitely want to consider each and every slate. And I don't know that Eilert's going to reinvent the wheel. He's been on Bob Huggins' staff for a decade, 2 decades, something like that. So he knows how to run this system. It's tough to have to replace Trey Mitchell. It's tough to have to replace Joey T. It's tough to have to replace Mo Wag, who I think Wag, had a lot of upside, right? But you do have some upperclassmen here who are going to do some damage. And Kerr Kriisa and Jesse Edwards, that pairing, I think is going to be awesome for DFS standpoint. Kriisa working off of Edwards, getting some open looks from 3. Kriisa creating shots for Edwards down low. That's just going to be a really nice look for both of those guys. And it's funny because Kerr Kriisa's freshman year, I really liked him as a value guy, but then the following season and after, I didn't really like him as much, and I didn't find myself using him that much. He is a entertaining kid, has an attitude, kind of likes to play that villain role, which is interesting for this West Virginia team. There's going to be a lot of shots for him, so he's going to be viable for sure. I think there's going to be a lot of intriguing stat lines for both of those guys throughout the season. But they need Ray Battle. That's definitely one that they need. Noah Farrakhan, also somebody they need. If they can't have Battle, they need to get Farrakhan, former highly rated recruit who basically just shot. He played with Amani Bates last year, and he just shot. Didn't make for a high rate, only 26% three-point shooter, but huge shooter. Didn't meet a shot he didn't like in terms of volume, but he does need a waiver as well. So they need one of those guys, definitely. A Cook has shown flashes throughout the course of his career. He's nothing special, but he's adequate. And I think in tandem, him and Slazinski kind of manning the force is going to be fine. They'll probably be cheap. They'll probably have games where they are really good, but they're going to have games where they're kind of just non-factors as well. So I don't have a lot of excitement about that group either. It's really Jesse Edwards, but we'll see what happens with the waivers there. All right, moving on. The UCF Knights coming into the Big 12, probably lower end program. Losing Taylor Hendricks, who we loved. You know, he was surefire star of college basketball if he came back, but you can't give up that first round money. CJ Kelly, Ethiel Horton, Brandon Suggs, Michael Durr, and Jalen Young all gone. That is a massive amount of their production. They do have some returners worthwhile. Darius Johnson, who was very good for us at times. His overall averages and numbers not that impressive, but he had some big fantasy games, especially earlier in the season. CJ Walker is back. He has shown flashes throughout the course of his career. Those are the two main returners, and then they bring in a absolute plethora of transfers that they had to replace, you know, a huge amount of guys. Jalen Sellers comes in from Ball State, DeMar Langford from Boston College, Omar Payne from Jacksonville. Omar Payne had his time at Florida as well. Ibrahim Diallo from San Jose State. Antoine Jones from Louisiana also was at Memphis and Creighton. He's been around. I love Anton Jones. I think this is a great way for him to reinvent himself. Shamari Allen transfers in from Kansas City. So a lot of new faces being integrated here. Shamari Allen, a 17 point per game scorer during his time with UMKC. Jalen Sellers, about a 14 points per game scorer, shot 45% from long range. Omar Payne, just a role player throughout the course of his career. He can rebound, he can block shots a little bit. Not much of a scorer, just going to fill that role. DeMar Langford played a ton of minutes, almost 30 per game there for BC. Definitely a lackluster shooter, solid enough defender, does a little bit of everything. Nothing great, but he's adequate. Antoine Jones, just all the hype in the world coming out of Memphis, just could never really get it going. Health been an issue, ineffectiveness been an issue. You know, played on a very talented team over the course of his career between, you know, Creighton, Memphis, Louisiana, just like all that Louisiana team, Jordan Brown, Kobe Julian, Greg Williams, like just couldn't find his place. I really, really want to see him do well. I want to see it turn out and become the player that I think a lot of us thought he could be. It just hasn't worked out. While he was at Memphis, he had a few games where he really looked like he could be the guard of the future for them. He started several games for them. He had several 13-7 type of games as a freshman. It was just like, this kid's going to be good. And it hasn't happened for him. Creighton, it didn't happen for him. But throughout the course of his career, he's maintained himself as a solid enough three-point shooter, about 32 to 35%. So if he can get minutes, he can stay healthy and play for a UCF team that is going to be lacking in identity, at least for the first few games. This is a good chance for him to kind of close out his career and do something special. So I do want to pay attention to Antoine Jones because he's going to be super cheap. And I think he could get some big minutes. Darius Johnson's clearly the guy, though. Leader, playmaker, the Dawkins go-to guy. I don't think we can come into it knowing and thinking that Jalen Sellers and Shamari Allen are going to play the way that they played at their prior schools. UMKC and Ball State, obviously competition's a lot lesser than what they're going to see in the Big 12. So I have that kind of concern there. Sellers did shoot 45% from long range, which is pretty damn solid on 120 attempts at Ball State. So, you know, they can put him in a position to shoot threes. But I don't know that he's going to be much of a playmaker or create for himself. He's a very good defender as well. But again, this is the Big 12. This is going to be really, really tough. Tyler Hendricks is on the team. It's Taylor's brother. But this roster definitely has holes. They're going to need CJ Walker to finally be healthy, break out, former top 50 recruit. A lot of DFS players or college basketball fans in general have been waiting for the CJ Walker kind of breakout year. This is the chance for him to do so and play a lot of minutes. So we'll keep an eye on him. I think UCF is going to have some viability. They're going to have some guys that are intriguing, but they're far from a team that's going to win many games at all, unfortunately. Last team to talk about moving into the conference here under Mark Pope. Gideon George and Rudy Williams both gone. They're no stranger to the transfer portal themselves. They bring in Dawson Baker from UC Irvine, Ali Khalifa from Charlotte. Khalifa filling that role for BYU. They've done, when they're the most successful, they've had these kind of versatile bigs who can shoot a little bit, contribute in all categories. Khalifa fills that role, and somebody that I think is going to thrive in this BYU system. So he's the first guy really to talk about and look at for DFS purposes. They do bring back Fousseyni Traore. He had big games at times, no consistency, but he did average 13 points and 8 rebounds per game. Somebody who, without foul trouble, you can really count on him to put up a high fantasy point per minute number. 25% usage rate, 23% defensive rebounding rate, combined rate of 35%, shot blocking extraordinaire, drew over 5 fouls per 40, just played a lot bigger than he actually is. He's about 6'5", 6'6", but he can play down low, and somebody who, without Gideon George, could really take that next step forward. Now I realize they're replacing him with Khalifa, but I do think those two can coexist together for sure. Jackson Robinson, I really like, 35% three-point shooter. Now, Jackson Robinson should be able to take a lot of the offense from Rudy Williams with him gone. Jackson Robinson played for Texas A&M, didn't get a bunch of minutes as a freshman, goes to Arkansas the following season, doesn't play a bunch of minutes there either, but showed flashes as a 33% three-point shooter. Then he ends up going to BYU, where he shoots 37% from long range. Very reliable, actually a pretty decent shot blocker in WCC games, and somebody that should theoretically take that next step forward here in his maturation. They do have Dallin Hall and Spencer Johnson as returners as well, both extra reliable three-point shooters who can definitely punish a defense. Dallin Hall shot about 36% from long range. Spencer Johnson shot 46%, 13th best mark in the country, 41 for 89. Not a huge amount of volume, but definitely enough. So you have those guys being able to contribute in that regard. Spencer Johnson, also a very strong defender. Number 1 steals rate in the WCC conference a year ago, and also shot 52% from long range in conference games. So we'll see what kind of step forward that group takes between Spencer Johnson, Dallin Hall, and Jackson Robinson. A lot of continuity, though, a lot of returners, so a little bit different there. But I love the inserting Ali Khalifa into that group, and then possibly bringing Dawson Baker off the bench. Depends, but it's just another three-point shooter. Baker shot about 37%. They have Noah Waterman, who shot about 33% as another, kind of versatile big. Trevin Nell as a kind of a bigger guard, shot 36% from long range. So they have a bunch of guys who can shoot on this team. They have a freshman coming in, and Marcus Adams, who somewhat interesting to see if they are able to insert him at any point. But this is a very interesting team, and one that is going to, I think, offer more upside than a team like West Virginia, more than UCF, of course. And I think these guys, at least coming out of the WCC, they played the Gonzagas, they played some upper tier competition, and they're not going to fold as much as some of these other newer teams to the conference, at least on paper. Also, if they get anything from Atiki Ali Atiki, another almost 7-foot guy with some versatility, then they'll be feeling real good about themselves. But they have a nice deep roster, and one that I like. I could see them going 8 or 9 deep, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. BYU's typically pretty deep under Pope. But they have a ton of shooting on this team, and it's going to be tough to guard them in that regard, and that's going to keep BYU around. They're going to hang around games because of their three-point shooting, and I don't think any of these guys are really going to be priced up at any point, at least for the first month. So there's going to be some value there for us to be had between guys like Jackson Robinson, Spencer Johnson, Fousseyni Traore, and that group of 6 or 7 guys. But I want to see how they insert Dawson Baker into that lineup as well. Definitely was a viable option at UC Irvine, and this is a team that I'm somewhat more interested in than I thought I'd be prior to the last month or so of the offseason. All right, so that is the Big 12. We started a little bit late tonight, so I apologize for that. Real quick, we'll do some awards here. I think you got to give the Player of the Year award to Hunter Dickinson. It feels lazy, but who else, man? Like in that Bill Self system, he's just going to be just stupid. It's going to be stupid. Defensively, there are a ton of really good individual and team defenses in this conference. Look out. I think majority of people would say DeJuan Harris. I will pick Tamin Lipsey to be the Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's going to be awesome. Really, really good. With the Player of the Year being Hunter Dickinson and a newcomer of the year, kind of seems lazy to do that too, but I don't know who else they would give it to. Perhaps Tyler Perry. And then the Coach of the Year coming out of this group, I think TCU is going to really surprise people. Think about how I felt about Kansas State last year and how they were written off by everyone, and Tang took them to a level that no one thought. That's how I feel about TCU this year. Now, Jamie Dixon's not in his first year, so not going to catch anybody off guard like Coach Tang did. This is going to be his 8th season with the program, but I think a lot of people are just going to look at it and say, wow, you lost your backcourt of Mike Miles and Damian Powell. Wow, you lost Eddie Lampkin. Now you're going to finish bottom half of the conference. But I think they're going to have a big season, and Jamie Dixon is going to walk away with some hardware here and kind of reintroduce people to who he is. Breakout. I want to have a breakout player for each. Tamin Lipsey, that's an easy one for me. I think he is a huge breakout candidate. I think he's going to be really good. I honestly feel like he's going to put up Halliburton-like fantasy points at some points this year, and we're going to be talking about him a lot. And then my first team or all conference team would have to be Hunter Dickinson, Tamin Lipsey. I'm married to the Lipsey play. I'm sorry, guys. Max Asmus. Gotta go with Max Asmus, right? He's our dude. Juwan Roberts, and then Dylan Dessou. So where would I be without Dylan Dessou? I wouldn't have brand new washer and dryer. I'll tell you that much. So I love this conference. Is going to be fun. This is a really intriguing group of teams integrating in some new programs. You've got some long time, veteran squads. You've got some infusion of talent. It would not surprise me at all. Everyone's going to be talking about the Big East and how tough they are, and they are. But it would not surprise me if the champion of our sport this year comes out of this Big 12, and it may not be Kansas. So that is all I have to say about that. We will be back tomorrow night, a little earlier perhaps. Same program, FTN Network, talking more about college basketball and previews. It will be the Big Ten Conference. I will be doing ACC the following day on Wednesday with a guest for that. Next week, we'll be doing Big East, SEC, and some mid-major content. Thank you to everyone who continues to support this show. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Same place as always. Take care. Be easy.